I have watched a lot of bad tutorial videos. Whether it be searching Instagram for throwing lessons or scrolling Google to see what kind of results you all actually get when you ask the Google robots the forever pertinent question, how do I take better photos? And let's just say, the results of those searches are, well, mixed. So when someone like Yair comes along and tells me he is predominantly self-taught via watching videos online, I have some questions. Not to mention, I was completely drawn into the beauty of his well-designed website. So then for him to tell me he's not a full-time maker, I have some more questions. But real quick, before we get into all of that, I wanted to remind you that next week, I'm hosting our free live webinar all on the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes, and yes, how to avoid them, even if you're using your cell phone. You can sign up at makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography. I have a bunch of example time zones listed when you go to select whether you want to join on January 26th or 27th. So pop on over to makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography to check out more details. My friends, this webinar is packed, and it is quite the undertaking any time I have hosted it. So I do only do this at most twice a year. If next week isn't a great time for you, there will be a replay for those who are signed up for the webinar, but it's only going to be live for about a week. So if you're signing up planning on the replay, just be sure to watch out for it as soon as it hits your inbox and watch it right away, okay? All right, enough housekeeping from me. I'm sure you remember the URL now. It's makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography, just in case. Once again, this episode is made possible in part by our sponsor, Amico.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brand, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brand. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
All right, now on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 13 years, Rebecca Kara. Hey, Yair, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rebecca. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now it's official all of a sudden. We were chatting away and now I've started it.
I got my serious voice now.
Right? It's a chick.
Yeah.
Before I get ahead of myself, rather, how would you introduce yourself to people listening?
Yeah, I always say, I'm a spare time potter. I do pottery whenever I have a minute to spare.
Yep. And where are you at? And so what's full-time? Where are you at in the world? Give us a little perspective.
Well, yes, I live in New Zealand. I am in a city called Dunedin, so it's in the South Island at the moment. Quite a terrible day, quite cold. 16, 17 hours more than you, something like that. So different days. It's quite bizarre.
We are currently recording the podcast in the future.
Yes. I'll tell you what happens. Yeah, I spare time because I do have a full-time job. I have a daytime as a software tester. I work in a software company and I am in charge of quality control. So, yeah, it's pretty much.
Which totally made sense to me after I looked at your website. And then you explained that in email and I was like, oh, this makes sense. Because part of what kickstarted me to be like, we need to have a conversation is I came to this website and was like, oh my gosh, finally, I have found a potter who has no offense to other people's websites, but it is a beautifully designed
Thank you so much. I mean, I appreciate that so much because it was so much work. By no means, I'm a website developer, but I do have a keen eye for things that I like, how they look and how they work. And yeah, I think it was version 3, the first iteration of the website was just not very good, but it was functional. It was working. It was selling pods and it was getting my name and contact forms and all that. It was capturing, email subscribers and all the things I needed to do, but not quite the right thing. And then I did a little makeup over it, and it looked better, but I still wasn't quite communicating what I wanted. And so I took like in this round, I made sure that, I had a lot of thought and introspection about what I want the website to say about me and share with people that land here, a little corner of the internet.
Which, like, to be fair, I'm not capable of having version 1 knock that out of the park. Like, I don't know how you can possibly.
No.
It's one of those things, like, you kind of have to put yourself out in the world to figure out, oh, okay, now I've learned some things and how I want to change that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's like editing, but with an audience, kind of. Because I don't know. I don't like also like the, paralysis by analysis situation where it's like you're just thinking about it. And some people call it perfectionism. I don't think it's more about that. It's more like, you just think about it so much that it just never gets done. Just get it out there. It's not perfect, but it works. And yeah, that's what it needs to for the time being. And so now I'm really happy with it. I'm sure like in a couple of years, I'll change it again. It seems to be like the creative cycle as well, where the website is like, I like this other color now for my font and this other typography, and I just change it over and over. But yeah, so far it's great. I actually really love it. And the biggest for this round was to actually do a photo shoot with an actual professional photographer that came to my studio. And
I noticed.
Yeah, definitely. There's only so much you can do with a tripod, right? Like I have taken like on automatic and put the camera there and shoots at me and when I'm doing things, but it's not the right feel as when somebody is behind the camera and actually like capturing moments that they think are interesting. So yeah, it has like this whole cohesion about it, the website, with the photo shoot to kind of like tells the story of the pot. I just went for like the pot in the process of making rather than finished products. I have like a little gallery section for that when it's like, hey, these are my glazes and this is the decorations that I make and that sort of thing. But throughout the website, it's just me making them, which I thought was more interesting.
It's more interesting, and it's also smart in terms of if you're going to invest in having another professional come out and create something for you, even if your style changes, even if you go from making like, I don't know, functional dinnerware to sculpture or something. That's not a great combination because obviously the act of sculpture is different, but you get what I'm saying. Like if all of your professional shots are process, it's not a finished piece. So if your glazes change, your surface treatments change, like your photos are still going to work. Unless you dye your hair blonde, then that won't.
Yes, I don't know if I can pull that off, but maybe for the next round, for website 4.0 will be me blonde. Interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was a good story to tell. Also make the pot more of a character in the website, and like from the beginning to the end, and there's photos of me throwing, photos of me wedging, and photos of me like trimming pots and that sort of thing. Yeah, exciting.
Totally. Well, and I had a mentor once, finally, I had gone through all of these website iterations myself and finally point out that websites are kind of like organisms. They're not literally living things, but they are a ever-changing, it's not necessarily, okay, check, I made a website, I'm never going to have to do that again, right? Because your needs might change, your audience might change, what you're making might change, like
when you get bored of making lunches. I've changed so many times, like areas about like orders and bespoke orders and commissions about like that, because I've changed as well, like the years of me making. The first round was like, I'll make everything, like anything you want. Just message me, I'll make all of these things. And now I'm more like, nah, I kind of I love commissions and wholesale orders, particularly my favorite thing at the moment. But I am very also like specific of like, yeah, no, I don't make that. So that also changes a lot in the website as well, all the time, the wording and, the communication about what it is that interests me as well. So, yeah.
Well, walk us back a little bit then. How long have you been making, and how did ceramics kind of get into your life?
Right. So I was in Buenos Aires in Argentina. I'm originally from Argentina. So I was there in 2014 when I was very bored staring at the ceiling in my apartment. And, I needed to do something. And it was just an interesting week or two of like trying to find something to do. Like I was in this space between, should I try clay pottery? I always wanted to do like some wood throwing, but then I was also like very interested in woodworking. But yeah, for some reason I just, had a hunch of like, I think I'm going to give the clay a go. And so I started going to it was a really cool workshop studio, kind of was like a space with teachers, about kind of like free roam kind of studio where there wasn't a class with someone teaching, this is what we do now, this is what we do next. It was more like, yeah, these are the wheels and here's a table. You can do hand building, you can do throwing, you can do whatever you want. You grab some clay from the corner, you widget here, you put it on the wheel. And it was really, really, there was no program at all of the class. It was just like learn at your own pace kind of. So yeah, I spent like weeks just making cylinders, and that was about 9-10 years ago, something like that. So that was my first experience with it. Then through the years I did more and less. I stayed in that studio for 3 or 4 years until I moved to New Zealand. And then when I moved here, I just joined a community studio. I moved to a different city. I was living in Wellington, which is another city in the north. Community studio, really cool space as well. Like lots of wheels, lots of like fellow ceramic artists that do lots of different techniques, and very interesting place to learn and absorb from other people. And obviously community studio with no teachers at all. That was just me throwing when I had the time. And then moved back down here to Dunedin and again joined the community studio here. But luckily I started buying things to set up my studio and had an Xperia room in my old house. And then we relocated at the beginning of this year, took the garage. There's a double car garage. Now it's a single car garage and it's half a studio. So yeah, one of the cars lives outside, but I have a fully functioning studio, and I managed to also wire my kiln. So I have everything I need inside my house, which is great.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, I love it. It's just so easy to make pottery now. Like, it's just, I don't even need to go out of the house because the garage is inside. Basically, just walk in my studio and just do pots whenever I have the time.
The weather won't even stop you. If it's raining, it doesn't matter. You don't have to.
Absolutely. And, for someone that you have like little bits of the day to do pottery, it's kind of like an ideal situation. I have like spurts of like an hour to an hour and a half, of time in the day where I just do bits. So yeah, having it just home, it's great. I don't have to go anywhere.
Because you have a little one now, right?
I have a 2-year-old little boy. Yeah.
That'll interrupt a few flow states.
Oh yes. Yes, makes it very unpredictable, to be honest. And, also got to balance it with a full-time job, and also the fact that I want to spend time with my partner as well. Like, it's not like, cool, the kid is asleep, I have no work, I'm going to do pottery right now.
Okay, bye.
Yeah. So, yeah, we just had to, purposely schedule little slots for creative times. And she also does, as she's a digital illustrator. So we have that, like when you draw, I pot and that sort of scenarios. But yeah, it's a challenge for sure, finding the time just to keep making the pots. But yeah, so far I've been doing great. And that's why I mean spare time, because I don't have an allocated part of the day or the week that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to do pots from here, because I don't know when I'm going to have time. Sometimes I have, a few days in a row where I can, go into the studio, and sometimes I might not be there for a few weeks.
Well, and what's interesting to me about that is, still making the commitment to do something like hire a photographer and create a really professional website. Like that's a very different perception, for me just clicking around on the internet, right? That does present a much more professional experience than I'm going to throw some stuff up on Etsy when I have the time. And that works. There's nothing wrong with that. Look, like Etsy's the only place we're currently selling our pots. So no shame whatsoever. But it does, it does give a kind of extra level of...
It's the handling.
Foresight?
Yeah. I mean, I've never went the Etsy route. I think I created an Etsy account and I just thought about it and ended up being like, nah, I kind of want my website for no apparent, like for no smart reason, just because I wanted one. And I thought, like I said, I'm not a developer, but I am, savvy enough to be able to build it. And yeah, I just wanted to have one. And I just tried to make it as nice as possible. I have this thing about like, the website is the only thing that truly belongs to you on the internet. And so like, I have very little I mean, I know email subscribers, I think at the moment it's like 75 or 80 email subscribers. But those are my people, like it's like they're not going anywhere unless they, for some reason, they consider me spam or something. Ended up unsubscribing. But like
your mom unsubscribes from
yes, I know. Yeah, it's like I don't want to see this thing. Yeah, but what I mean, like, and people obviously Instagram and other places also can stop following you in the same manner, but you're tied to Instagram rules or Etsy rules, and also their business versus it being your own space that you can do whatever you want with it. So yeah, I just wanted to have one. I thought finally now that I have a more serious studio practice as well, because I find that when I also made my first website, I haven't done enough pods for the website to reflect my style, my story, my art, whatever. So yeah, I had to make, like seriously sit down and make and explore the glazes that I use and do color variations and try this one and try the other one. And like keep making enough volume that eventually, was like, oh yeah, okay, now I'm finding my voice a little bit more, and now it makes sense to have a stylized front with, I don't have a store, so it's,
I mean, that is what a website is. It is a virtual store for people. I mean, whether you're actively selling or not, it is, I should say, a virtual storefront. So what I find fascinating about what you just said is that when I first got back into ceramics, I was like, ooh, I'm going to make this, or ooh, I'm going to make it. Ooh, like it was like shiny object syndrome, right? Where one day I was going into the studio and I was making bowls. The next day I thought that I was going to make a lidded vessel because, yeah, sure, after a month of time, I totally have the skills to do that. Why not? But what you've just explained was you mentioned when you were in Buenos Aires that you were making cylinders, and it sounded to me like repetitively. And then you were just talking about being very intentional about testing out this material and finding your style. And that makes sense to me now. That makes sense to me in terms of like when I think about how I learned how to play an instrument and like practice and repetition. But to be a kind of spare time potter, as you described it, to have that perspective is unique to me. That takes, I don't know, self-control or focus, or where is there other background that we don't know about?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been a maker, if that helps. Like I've always loved the whole idea of making things with my hands and crafts since I was, in school. I've always been, spending weekends doing crafts and that sort of thing. So I always had a position to like make stuff. I think with clay is the first day or two in the studio, I was just failing miserably at doing what I wanted to do. I was just going to make a cup or a bowl, and I was just like not happening. So it was just something in me. I was like, well, first I need to learn how the clay moves on the wheel, because something that probably people don't think about, how like actually clay moves on the wheel. Like it has movement. It's not you moving the clay. And so yeah, it was just something like, yeah, I'm just going to do cylinders. And I was just like making them, destroying them and re-wedging and making them again until I made an actual cup. And interestingly enough, my first cup actually looked like a cup. It was quite nice. It was heavy and short, but it was like, it wasn't wobbly or anything, because I had spent all this time doing cylinders. So that was probably how I got to that, space for like, I was just going to practice for a little bit until I can get, how this moves. Yeah, in terms of the rest of like discovering, I just love to study those sort of things. I mean, I just love to see the difference in clays and difference in glazes and materials. I'm always just like trying different clay bodies and see how I can push them in different ways and what sort of thing can I do with one clay that I can't do with the other. And yeah, that's just choices, I suppose, like if you don't try enough things, you don't have enough things to choose from. Like if this is my clay and my glaze, well, yeah, your pool of choice is very limited. So yeah, the only other way is to just try other things, which is way easier now that I have them at home as well, because I don't have to drive half an hour into the studio and yeah, depend on the community kiln. But yeah,
but balancing both choices and the intentionality, I think, is something that now that you've described it, what I was seeing on the website and the professional level that I was seeing, now all of this connects together because I'm like, oh, okay. Because I think what so many of us, when we first start, it's for me, at least, I'm not going to put it on anybody else's story. For me, I got really excited about it. And I started doing a little bit of everything. And I was also taking community class where obviously each week you were getting a different demo, you were getting a different exercise to try out. And so I very intentionally for myself had to kind of take a step back and think back to what it was like to learn an instrument and realize, I had to sit there and practice scales until I wanted to scream, or sometimes I was screaming.
Yes.
Practice these really boring exercises over and over and over again, because that's actually what allowed you to play, Beethoven or whatever. Yeah. And so once that clicked in my head for ceramics, it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to just make sets now. One, because, maybe somebody's going to ask me to make a set of bowls. Let me see if I can make them match. But also by making the same piece over and over and over again, I learned so much in my skill and what I was doing wrong and how I could make it better because you were making the same thing every time. So you could compare it more. But
yes, no, I think for me, the intentionality came also the hard way about, like I was saying at the beginning, saying yes to everything that people asked from me, and quickly realizing, oh crap, I don't actually know how to make flags. And had a commission like 24-piece dinnerware commission, and after that I was like, yeah, I'm not making dinnerware for the next few years. I don't enjoy making plates. Plates are my worst enemies. I didn't enjoy
flat
that.
Things so hard?
Yes, I know. They take so much space in the kiln, and drying them is a nightmare. And so, but I made it because I had given my word that I would make it. So for making 6 plates, I had to make like 25 of them because they kept cracking, and But then I was like, what the smart thing to do is just ask people what they want. And if I don't want to make it, then I can say, sorry, but I don't really make that. But I can give you, the name of some potters that I know that will be interested in doing that. And, also share some of other people that I enjoy their work. And I know that they would enjoy making that as well. But I learned that, politely saying no, it's okay. It doesn't ruin my reputation or anything. When you start selling, I guess it's like you just want to sell pieces. But now I just rather make things and let people find the things that I make. And if they like them enough, maybe they will order something on a tangent. And then I can say, I can actually make that. But also with practice, I'm more confident on knowing my skills, how far they can go. And I know that I don't throw big at the moment. I'm not really good at making big pieces. So I can say, I'm not comfortable taking that one. But yeah, sure, I can make coffee pour-overs or that sort of thing that I've never made before, but I know that I can make it. So I think, probably that way. Another thing that was really interesting is what you just said about how you started with your lessons and having, a demo and that sort of thing. I guess the way that I learned, which was like, come, do whatever you want. It kind of had to be self-imposed to be like, well, I have to actually learn. Like that it wasn't really, we have this week to make a cup, or this week is a bowl, or that sort of thing. So I had, time to focus and be like, I'm going to take a few months to make a cup. And until I did, move to the next thing and the next thing. And it was really interesting always bringing ideas to the studio and things that I would see on YouTube or Pinterest and be like, I want to make this. But, okay. My teacher will be like, I reckon that you can do it this way. Like this seems like a 3-piece pot. We do this piece first and this other piece first. And so it was I guess a different learning process where there was no structure. There was more like the freedom to explore and, failing quickly, I suppose, I think it was quite good. I always think back to that situation, and because I am sort of like a teacher, I enjoy teaching people. I love, sharing what I know and seeing people learn and do things as well. And I've always thought that, if I had a studio where I would teach people, it would kind of be that sort of vibe of like, it's open, come for 2 or 3 hours and make a pot and then leave and then come the next day. And I'm there and I can help you. And that's cool. I think it helps like flex different muscles in your creativity when you have no structure, I suppose.
I mean, sometimes it's harder, right? I think that I find myself drawn to commissions because someone's telling me what to make. I don't have to come up with like, oh, okay, cool. That's what you want. I can do that. Like, rather than let me come up with my own creative idea. Ooh, that's nerve-wracking. But I love what you mentioned before about the fact that when we start to sell, then we can kind of get carried away into this, okay, let me just sell. Because it is obviously a dopamine hit to our brains when someone's like, you've made something, I like it enough, I want to give you money. But I think that what you brought up is often lost in the noise of the internet, where there is a huge benefit for you having a full-time job elsewhere to give yourself the creative freedom to just explore this medium, to explore the different clay bodies, to explore the different glazes, and not worry about, is it going to sell or not? Because in this moment of time, that's not, like your 2-year-old's going to have groceries no matter what. It's all good.
Yes. So it's all good. Absolutely. It's a little bit of a luxury. And it's something that I also had to come to terms with because, it was this whole thing about like, I want to be a full-time. It's very interesting. The other day I was saying to my partners, like, I think I did a 3 or 4 hour run in the studio because I had Christmas coming up and people want pieces and I had a weekend. So I was just going to crunch a bunch of chores in the studio. And I came out, I was like, who wants to be a full-time photo? That's insane. I want to do this full-time. It's crazy. So it's like I'm kind of enjoying my actual time allocation for it because, I don't have that pressure. And I do take exciting things on because, when people actually want to work with me, it's something that I actually, want to make it happen. And that's probably the commissions that I take. So one thing that I wanted to tell you is that you actually gave me permission to like wholesale orders. I think I was in a few of the episodes, because it's one of those things that, like I sort of thought that I liked, but I was like, is it right to like them? Because it's like, you're losing half your revenue. But then, it's like listening to you, I can't remember exactly. It was a few episodes, you've mentioned it here and there. And I was like, yeah, man, I like this. I do like selling 100 pieces to one person. No. 1 to 100 people. So
I should stop talking about it because I don't want other potters to, I'm probably not going to aim for a wholesale client in New Zealand anytime soon, but like American potters, I don't want it to catch on because that's my angle, right?
Yeah. It's awesome. I mean, no, it's not. It's actually not that great.
Yeah, because you don't have time. If you're working a day job, you don't necessarily have the time to commit to marketing yourself and to posting on Instagram constantly and to growing the email subscribers from 70 to 700 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I'm also very bad at all of that. It's one of my blind spots. I need to learn how to do that. I'm terrible. I love taking photos and posting them on Instagram because photography is something that I've also done forever. I'm by no means a photographer, but I like taking photos. So whenever I have a nice picture, I like posting it. But all the consistency and the discipline and feeding the algorithm to grow, I am very bad at all that. So I am just happy that, I have a place where people can discover what I do. And when they want to buy something, there's stock in the store. And if the retail works, that's great. If it doesn't bother me because I do have like a few wholesale things going that are really excited to me. A couple of, like cafes that want to display pots in the shelves to sell and that sort of thing that I actually really, really wanted to make happen. So I always work with people that can also work with my schedule. Like I always say, I can make it happen potentially the 3 to 6 weeks mark, but no promises. And as long as people say that's cool, then we can work together. But it's something that you gotta process exactly what you want, because the whole thing about doing it on your spare time and not full time or even part time at this point in life, I just happy that I get to do it with no consequences if I don't sell, because I am not good at selling at the moment. So it's one of the things for the future, I suppose.
Well, and if there's no need to have to learn to be good at marketing or have to learn to be good at sales. I mean, I only got good at those things because I quit the other jobs and I had no other income. So I had to get good at marketing and sales, right?
Yes.
Like there was no other option at that point. And that's that's mentally one of the most difficult things for a lot of us is when we get passionate about something, we want to go all in and we kind of lose sight of the benefits of the uncomfortable middle ground and finding a balance of both spaces or realizing like that your skills and your legitimacy as a potter can be just as good, whether or not that's where the retirement plan is coming from. I was going to have to say healthcare, but I feel like you get that either way.
Yes. It's one of the things that it was difficult, like about 2 or so years ago for me it's one of those things that like where you want to be or you think you want to be when you are now, and they're so different. And you're like, oh, I'm never going to make it. And, you have to like process all of that. Had I started sooner, I could have, be further down the track now. And now it's too late. I'm not 20 anymore. Like that train of thought that is not very smart. That doesn't make any sense. But it's just when when you're not happy with this current situation, I suppose it's like the grass is always greener, I suppose, on the other side. But yeah, I'm still processing. There are moments where I'm like, I wish I had one day. Like maybe I'll work 32 hours and not 40, and then I'll have Fridays off and I can do one studio day. But then it's not really quite exactly what I want at the time. So that I'm just cruising on it and just letting pots, speak for themselves when they come out. I think it's really interesting what you said about not because, I guess a full-time potter or with that sort of thing is like, a legitimate potter or like you don't have the skills to do it. It's just like at the moment, I suppose it's working how it is. So it's really interesting, few months for me. Last year or so, like of like processing that and then doing a little bit of, I guess, like self-therapy to be like, no, it's okay. Just give it a couple more months and yeah, I'm happy. So that's good.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the mindset, consciousness or recognition or battle, depending on the day, is one of the biggest things that doesn't get talked about maybe, and two is even when your skills are, even like for me 12 years later, I know I can walk into any room and take a good photo. Like I know my way around a camera. I know my way around lighting. But even still, there is still mindset junk that goes on in your head that you kind of have to go to battle against on a regular basis to be like, no, we're good. We're fine. You can, lizard brain over there can just settle down. Like there's no saber-toothed tiger coming at me. We are fine.
Yes.
Or
absolutely.
Instagram or whatever else is out there messing with our heads. Well, tell us a little bit about how you came also to this style, or because you were saying it's kind of been a process over the last couple of years. And I mean, for me, there was just such continuity in your web presence, in the website, like not only in the design of the website, but also in kind of the tongue-in-cheek language, in the names that you have for your glazes. Like so for the past couple of months in the community, in our online membership, we've been talking about the importance of being able to talk about your ideal client and your ideal audience. And your website is so zoned in to me in terms of, and I don't know if it feels this way for you, but like, the fact that you have this clever approach to naming, which tells me a little bit about your passions and what you like in your spare time.
Yes.
But then also the aesthetics all go together. That's like, maybe I'm putting more onto it. Tell us your perspective from all of that.
I mean, I think you are spot on because everything, the wording, I guess you are talking about all the Star Wars inspiration. I love Star Wars universe. I am not by no means the most knowledgeable in it, but it's part of my identity, I suppose. It's one of those things that ceramics is a part of me, and I guess what else is a part of me? So, Star Wars was one of them, and I was like, this is really good because I have an infinite amount of things to pull from when it comes to using words and naming and talking to people about also what interests me other than pottery and maybe form a bond with someone. I have lots of people reaching out to me on Instagram saying, I just love the names of your glaze. It's not even the glaze color or the pot. I just love the name of the glaze. I'm like, thank you. I also like it. But I kind of like, that's where it ends for like the Star Wars inspirations. I don't do, this is whatever, a Stormtrooper cap or what. Actually, I do have a Stormtrooper cap, but like, I don't really do, like an actual modeling of Star Wars. It's just like, this color, this texture reminds me of something, makes me feel something that is related to the universe, and then I use that as also sharing another part of me. I think for styles and like what it is that I make and how it looks like, I've just made many things. So it's a combination of things that I've watched on YouTube that really resonate with me. The Goldmug Gallery videos, a lot of like really good potters talking there, and I can't remember, I think it was the Mike Dodd episode. He says something about like pottery is about choices, and like a potter might say, I like this place, and I was like, no, I don't like that one, I like the other. And it's just like, I guess, like a snowball effect of little tiny choices. When you are trimming, you do a little bit of a thicker foot ring or a thinner one, and it's like, no, I like the thinner one better. And then you just make these tiny decisions on one pot at a time, and then over time, once you made a couple of hundred of them, it just comes out that way from me. It's kind of automatic, the process, but there is I suppose, an underlying intention of them. It's just the little tiny decisions of when I make the pieces. So that, I think, it's just the making that sort of brought that together, which is something that I also heard somebody else, I can't remember. I like to give credit where credit is due, but that those things kind of like...
I can't remember names to save my life. I can describe someone's pot to you in like perfect detail and not remember that it's like, it could be something as obvious as like a leech, like a leech pot, and I can't remember the name.
It was Kevin Kowalski. I did the workshop that he did with Kurt Hammerly. He did a 3-day class of making pottery, and at the end there was a Q&A. I can't remember the question, but something very interesting that both Kevin and Kurt say about style, and I think Kevin said something like, your style is there, you just haven't made enough things to find it, which I thought was like, this is brilliant. This is exactly it, because it's one of those things that when you are a beginner, I suppose, you kind of want to find it, but it's not something that you just flip a rock and it's under there, that's my style right there. You gotta just keep making them, and yeah, I guess like the combination of those two concepts of like make little decisions and build your style by making stuff. It's like what got me here. And the beauty of that is that it never ends. I'm hoping that in a year's time, my pots will look different. And a year after that, also just keep growing and keep changing what I like, and the things that I make. It's just evolved with me over time.
Yeah. It's funny that you brought up that Kevin quote, because the through line I was hearing as you were describing this was the necessity of repetition. That you started with realizing, okay, I need to make a cylinder over and over again to be able to physically make what I'm wanting to make in a cup. Yes. But then also that either by accident or intentionally, through all those little choices, through the repetition intrinsically, is how your style actually came out. And I feel like the new tagline underlying so many of my conversations is me trying to convince hobby potters to learn production.
Yes.
Not necessarily for the act of, okay, you're going to go sell 100 mugs now, but just for the skill set, like for the craftsmanship that comes from that repetition. Yes. But
yeah. And there is also, I feel like, different approaches to production pottery and repetition, because yes, you have your design of mug, and then you can do the same one over and over again, and you can do that. I am not quite there. I like to do rounds of it, but personally I like to do variations on the same pot, so they have proportionally similar one to another in size and the intention of the shape and that sort of thing, but they're not made. I don't use like a pointer or anything to make them to the same size. The only thing that I do is grab the same amount of clay at the beginning, whatever it is, at the same size of the clay ball. I know that they're going to be roughly the same volume at the end, but in terms of form, they don't necessarily match one to another. But I do make batches of like 30 or 40 at a time, which is repetition throwing, except it's not exactly the same shape. So I guess a different approach for some people might consider, studio practice boring, because it's like, I got to make the same thing over and over. But you can actually do it differently. You don't have to do what works for somebody else. And what works for me is, I like to make rounds of mugs. They're all the same size, but they're also all different, which I think is different, I suppose.
Which I think probably also informs making those little choices to go deeper and deeper on your style, because then you look at that board and go, right, if you come back in the studio the next day or the next weekend, you might look at that board of pots and the first 10 you realize you don't actually like anymore. And the next, Sandy Lockwood talked about this in terms of it being like sketching in clay, right? So you sit down and, okay, I'm going to make mugs over and over again, but I'm going to change on every single one. I'm going to do a different rim. And then you look at all of them, you look at 10 mugs with all different rims, and then you can look and say, oh, actually, I'm more drawn to a thicker rim, or I'm more drawn to this, or I'm more drawn, and then, all right, great. Now that tells me something about what aesthetics I like, and go deeper the next time.
Absolutely the only way to find your style, right? Like, it's just increase the pool of choice that you have. I think it's all about that. There's a very interesting exercise in Ben Carter's book, Mastering the Potter's Wheel, that he says something about like you have 10 balls of clay and you can make 10 pieces that are different. So it's, cup bodies or whatever, they're the same piece, but different shapes. And then you kind of choose one and then destroy the other 9 and then, make 9 more of the original one that you like. So in that way, you can do both things. Like you can flex your creative muscles by making 10 different things, and then you just keep one and then do more of the same one. So you also learn repetitive throwing, which I think is a great exercise and a great way to also learn what you like. I think he also says to sketch them before you destroy them so that you don't actually lose what you made. Take photos, I suppose, if you're not
I was just going to say, I take a picture.
Yeah, I don't draw, but yeah. Yeah.
The drawing gets me nowhere because when I look at the notebook, I'm like, what the hell was that?
That's not work at all for me. But yeah, sketching on the clay, though, that's a good idea. I like that concept.
The moment that I realized I could write notes on a photo in my phone without having a different app where I could write the code for the glaze or whatever, instead of trying to keep a notebook, because obviously most instructors will tell you to have a notebook and keep track of like what glazes you used on which pots so you know what you like and as you're discovering all of this. But I could never match my sketches to the pot.
Never.
And so it was life-changing when I could write my notes.
The confusing thing is that I don't know if it's because my drawings are so bad that it can't be done with clay, or because I'm not good at clay yet to make what I draw. And so I just dropped the drawing entirely. Like, no, this is not a good starting point.
My problem is that what is in my head and what comes out of my hand are not the same thing. There's like a nerve ending that must be snapped somewhere because...
Different medium. It's a different medium.
Yes, 100%. Oh, I love that. Well, what I'm hearing, and I'm going to stay conscious of time because I know you actually have to go to work.
That's all right, yeah.
What I'm hearing, kind of, again, coming back to that repetition with your story, though, too, is just so much, self-discipline also around. Like, it's not too often, I feel like I'm guilty of going straight to Instagram for inspiration, or someplace where you have, someplace like YouTube, you can get overwhelming amount of information and also not necessarily from, there's no polite way to put this, reliable sources, right? Like there's a lot of people trying to teach pottery out there that may or may not be helpful, because we all have our own bad habits. And so thinking about going onto YouTube, but intentionally listening to the Goldman tapes, or they're not called the tapes. That just made it sound like this really creepy, expose. You know what I mean?
Yes,
but
yes.
Between that and Ben Carter's book, and these are really, proven sources to then also be self-teaching. I'm stumbling around what I'm trying to say here. For you to describe yourself as a spare time potter and yet have so much intentionality and so much self-discipline and focus, I feel like we need a different term.
Yeah, I guess it's not just about for how long I make it. I think the point, I guess, that I got from what you're saying is it matters what you are trying to learn more than like when you go for a source of inspiration. There's a point where nobody can teach you more about throwing because you need to grow your skill. Like, if you know what I mean, like, yes, this is how the techniques for centering, this is the techniques for opening and pulling walls, but there's no way of teaching advanced moves to do all of that quicker or more efficiently if you haven't built your skills yet. So what I was doing while I was practicing the basics was just try to learn about pottery and know how to make the pottery. I think that's how you land. You just listen to these people talk about what they do, what they think it's important and attractive in a pot, and about functional wear, and about, I think I've watched video of people just throwing without explanations about like just to see where do they look at the pot. I don't know. It's just little things that you kind of have to approach learning in a more holistic way than just, okay, just tell me how to pull it, well, like that. There's only so much that you can do. And I always remember my teacher in my original Buenos Aires studio trying to teach me how to tap sinter pots for trimming. And he was like, the pot comes out of the sinter, right? And then you tap it and it comes closer to the sinter. And you do that enough times and then it's sintered.
Not when I do it.
And he was like, well, that's all I can tell you. Like, you have to sit down and tap it until it goes into the sinter. Like, you know what I mean? That is exactly, I think that helped me learn other things as well, because it's like, there's only so much people can show you until you actually go and do it and fail and practice until you get, now you tap the pot 3-4 times and yeah, it's sintered. It's super like second nature kind of movement. But that's not what I was focusing on learning when I was going to the internet, I suppose. This is, trying to find, I guess, words that I didn't have to communicate why I like pottery so much. And it's one of those, I guess, frustrating limitations when people don't do pottery. Or you're trying to explain, but look at this part of the glaze. Look what it's doing. And people are like, yeah, it's a cool color. It's like, you don't get it.
Do you go out to dinner with your partner now, and once you finish a meal, you're like picking up the plate, and your partner's like, "What are you doing? Why are you put the plate back down?"
Yes, we like op shops, and there's a lot of pottery in op shops, and the only thing that I go and flip pottery around to see the bottoms of them. It's an obsession that I don't know. I feel like it's a potter thing to do because it's like we kind of look at the places where the part that you put more work onto to see if other people care about the same thing. So the first thing I do is just like flip it around. I like to see how people trim the bottoms because trimming is what I enjoy most doing. So I'm like, I wonder what else I can learn from somebody else that made it for.
That's amazing. Yep. I took a picture. Francesco and I were out to dinner at some point and we're both like, the plates are full and we're like looking and picking them up and hold them. And it's like only when potters are at dinner does.
That's amazing. I love that.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh, this hour has gone by very quickly. I don't have a good way to wrap things up. I could just keep chatting. What do you feel like? Well, actually, this is one thing I did want to talk to you about, because when you are selling your work, are you mostly selling to New Zealand or are you shipping internationally?
I'm only selling to New Zealand at the moment. I haven't figured out the international shipping yet. Not the packing, but the logistics of it. I don't have mind space for that.
The customs and all of the things. Cool. Okay, so everybody should just feel better in general that it's normal to not have that figured out. That's the point of that question.
Yes, absolutely. Don't worry if you don't ship international. You're okay.
Well, because I was imagining it's a much different reality for you in New Zealand than for someone in California to say, I don't ship internationally. Well, population density wise, you've still got millions of people. So
yeah, New Zealand is a small space. Not a lot of people, but
there's a lot
the
of
markets are different, I suppose. Yeah, there's a little sheep making bowls for water. Maybe another unexplored market.
Yarn bowls. Bowls.
Yarn bowls. Yeah, people do like knitting.
New Zealand is on my bucket list. I know it's like probably a huge white girl stereotype, but I feel like the hype of taking a road trip in a camper van through New Zealand probably lives up to the Instagram pictures. Yeah.
It does. Literally driving on the highway is way more fun than the places you go and see, because it's just so beautiful that driving around, it's just a pleasure.
Amazing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to make that happen. I'm not scared by 14-hour plane rides the way a lot of people are. It's the perk of being short.
Or a good sleeper. I sleep everywhere, so 14 hours fly by really quickly.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you so much for making the time amidst work and baby and all of the time zones.
That is all good. Thank you for having me. I love a good pottery chat. So it's also good to have it with people that actually are not bothered by someone blabbering about pots for an hour. So that's a good change of pace.
Anytime. Before we stop, where should people come to see all of your Star Wars named, inspired but not likened?
Yes. My website is kenobi.co.nz and my Instagram is @KenobiCeramics.
Awesome. And I will link all of that stuff so people can click away with their muddy fingers.
Thank you so much.
I just want to repeat something Yair just said, just in case you were only half listening or you walked out of the room. He said, there's only so much people can show you until you actually go and do it, and fail, and practice until you get it. Now, that might be a weird thing to hear coming from a woman who literally sells a system on how to take better photos, but it's true. Any educator telling you otherwise, promising something different, well, frankly, they're selling you a pack of lies. I can give you the system, but things don't start improving until you practice the skills. I would wager a bet that this is true for any craft. Photography, pottery, woodworking, metalsmithing, glasswork. I don't know, pick a medium, any medium. Music, culinary arts. You get the idea. Craftsmanship in all its forms seems to be one of the few remaining things in the world that technology can't really speed up. There is very little instant gratification in these skills that we're trying to pursue. Maybe that's why we like it so much. This reminds me that I wanted to write up an episode sometime about what I think I learned about business by being a musician before any of the rest of it, of all of this, before being a photographer, before being anything. So I'm just going to leave the rest of that rambling thought for another day and awkwardly stop here and segue. So this all being said, I do believe that great teachers and educators can speed up our learning. I sure got better at centering once I had someone show me what I was doing wrong, rather than the literal year I spent by myself at a wheel, not being able to manage to make a darn thing. So with that, here's your friendly reminder that next week, January 26th and 27th, I'm hosting my free live webinar, The Foremost Common Instagram Photography Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. Yes, this does work with your cell phone also. Sign up to save your spot at makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography. This webinar, like I said at the very beginning, is a big undertaking. So at most, I host it twice a year. I have no idea when the second time is going to be at this moment. Maybe, probably sometime in August, so it's in the hands of people before all of the holiday craziness. But if you want to kickstart 2023 right now with better photos faster, yes, you'll still have to practice, but I'm going to give you 4 quick, tangible, easy to implement fixes to guide that practice and get you off to the right start. Well, then be sure to come join me. One more time, you're going to sign up over at makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography. Or, of course, you can just click the link in the show notes. And if you're listening to this after January 26th or 27th, don't worry. You can still pop your email into the form at makersplaybook.com/newsletter to get on our free monthly photo tips email list that happens all year long. And while next week is typically when that monthly newsletter goes out, since I'm hosting the webinar and there's a lot going on with that, we're gonna skip this month because there's way more happening in that webinar than I could pack into 1 month's email anyways. And we'll be back to our regular scheduled tips starting again in February. A big thanks to Amico for sponsoring the Maker's Playbook podcast and helping to make this episode possible.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brand, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brand. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
Additionally, audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Codovan with promotional material assistance from Queenie Malachi. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together We've got this.